From farm to plate, food is an essential element for our survival, for our economy, but also as a social activity and as part of our cultural heritage. We have learned how to better feed the growing global population, how to make food healthier and more nutritious, how to move fresh produce across the world. But this abundance also comes with waste and a greater burden on our planet. We believe we can respond with a lighter impact to a growing need for food. What if we could both feed the next billion people and support our planet? What if we started by reducing food waste? What if eating was both a moment for sharing and being healthy? And what if by changing how we eat, we could change ourselves and our planet? What if we were able to make Agriculture 4.0 a reality everywhere? And while 60% of the world's chronically hungry people are women, what if we could make agriculture gender equitable? We believe we can. By sharing our knowledge, inspiring each other, by feeding the growing population while living in harmony with our planet, we believe it is possible to build a brighter future. So, what if it started here, today?
Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to the World Majlis as part of Food, Agriculture and Livelihoods Week here at Expo 2020 Dubai. I'm Sally Musa and I am delighted to be your host for this edition of the Majlis, which is all about farms of the future, feeding the planet with technology. We're delighted that the Australian Pavilion is hosting us today. Australia is, of course, a key global leader, particularly in the area of food and agriculture. So I'd like to begin by thanking the team here at the Australian Pavilion. And to kick everything off, I would like to invite His Excellency, the Commissioner General for the Australian Pavilion, Justin McGowan, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Sally. That's a wonderful introduction. I just want to say welcome to the Australian Pavilion. Thanks. It's a real honour to be able to host the World Majlis events. You know, this is exactly what Expo is all about. It's about bringing some of the greatest minds together, no expectation from the panellists, some wonderful thought leaders to talk about some of the world's most significant challenges. Sally is right. We are a significant food producer in Australia. We like to think that we've got some pretty good technology, or even though we are the driest continent on Earth. So I think there's a lot of contribution to this global conversation that Australia can add. And we're fortunate to have three fantastic speakers here today. Getting the balance right between food security and environmental sustainability is really important to Australia. And it's something that we've been working on for a number of years. And the evolution continues. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. We have people from the meat, dairy, government sectors here today with a broad cross-section of insights. So just want to say thank you for the opportunity to host one of the World Majlis. Again, looking forward to the conversation and best of luck to all the speakers.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Your Excellency, and we are lucky as well. After the World Majlis session, we are going to be hosted here to an amazing dinner afterwards that is going to be prepared by a very special guest chef as well, an Australian guest chef, Aaron Brooks, who is a leading light in the culinary world, and where we get to taste some of Australia's best and most amazing produce. Now, as we get into today's topic, the human population continues to expand at unprecedented rates, and we're at a point where it is vital to find innovative solutions to ensure the future availability of food for all within the limits of our planet's resources. So, in order to feed the 2 and 3 billion people who are expected to join planet Earth by 2050, it's estimated that global food production is going to need to be stepped up by at least 70% in the next 30 years. And so we've had intensive agriculture. It might have been successful in feeding most of the Earth's inhabitants, but It's also degrading the land and contributing to a quarter of the planet's rising temperatures. And so the farms of the future are going to need to be radically different as they adapt to climate change, to scarcity, and to become more profitable, productive, and sustainable. So today we're going to ask, what will the farms of the future need to look like to provide nutritious, healthy, and affordable food for all while preserving the environment? Will technology provide the solutions that we need, or are other low-tech innovations also part of the answer? How can we build resilience into agriculture industry supply chains as well for improved food security? And what role should governments and industry regulations play in the future of farming? So to answer these questions and more, we're lucky enough to be joined by a stellar panel of experts from all over the world who are joining us both virtually and in person today. I'd like to start here on my right with His Excellency Fernando Matos Costa, the Minister of Livestock, Agriculture and Fisheries for Uruguay. Within his long history in the agricultural, engineering and livestock industry, he has previously been the president of the National Meat Institute and was a member of the board of directors of the International Stocksman Educational Foundation based in Houston, Texas. Please welcome His Excellency Minister Matos. Professor Vesna Bengin is the co-founder of the Biosense Institute, which focuses on the digital transformation of agriculture. She's the coordinator of H 2020 project Antares, which aims to evolve Biosense Institute into a market-oriented European Centre for Research Excellence. Antares is the largest research project ever funded in Serbia by the European Union, in which, besides developing institutional scientific excellence, Professor Bengin also directly focuses on fostering the economic growth of the region as well as development of national policies in research and innovation. Please welcome Professor Bengin. Matthew Atkins over here is the General Manager of Bigger Foods International and Australian Food Service. Prior to that, Matt was the General Manager Commercial for the Bigger Nutritionals business unit from 2016 up to 2021. Please welcome Matthew Atkins. Over here we have Andrew Cox, General Manager International Markets for Meat and Livestock Australia, based in Singapore. He manages a team of approximately 50 staff in 17 locations throughout Asia, the Middle East, Europe and the United States. Please welcome Andrew Cox. Over here, we have Kelvin Wickham, Chief Executive Officer for Fonterra New Zealand AMENA. With over 30 years at Fonterra and in the global dairy industry, Kelvin is driven by his belief that dairy is a high-quality source of nutrition in the world. Currently in his role as CEO for AMENA, he's responsible for Fonterra's activities across consumer food service and ingredients in Africa, the Middle East, Europe, North Asia, and the Americas. Please welcome Kelvin Wickham. Professor Rod Wing is a Professor of Plant Science and the Director of the Centre for Desert Agriculture at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Professor Wing's lab focuses on the discovery of utilization of natural variations in the genus Oriza. We can't wait to hear about this. This is so next level to help solve that 10 billion people question: how do we feed our world without destroying the planet by 2050? Please welcome Professor Rod Wing. And last but not least, joining us virtually, we're so glad you stayed up for this, we have with us Professor Andrew Lowe, Professor of Plant Conservation Biology at the University of Adelaide in Australia, a British-Australian scientist. He solves some of the most pressing global resource production and landscape sustainability challenges through the application of technology innovations delivered in a responsible and economically realistic framework. Please welcome Professor Andrew Lowe. All right. So, now, as this is very much in the format of an Arabic Majlis, we are here to share ideas, to discuss new ways of doing things. So we do invite you, our Majlis audience, in fact, into the discussion with your questions and with your comments as well. And so, if I can start with you, Professor Lowe, with that big question that we need to address today, how are we in fact going to feed the world without destroying it? Talk us through the biggest challenges that are facing us right now and why there is in fact such a need to really transform farming in the future.
This is really the critical question. I think if we look at food production and how food production has progressed to date, we can see a lot of food production. It also goes hand in hand with environmental degradation. We've lost a lot of topsoil, we've lost a lot of fertility out of that soil, and we've also got problems with water purity, and other pollution-related problems. We've also basically run out of land to clear for new agriculture, so land clearance is no longer really the solution to feed the next 3 billion people. We've really got to be looking at two basic drivers, I think, on food production systems. The first one is the repair of existing systems. We're seeing declining productivity, declining fertility of our farming systems around the world, and some quite basic and almost in your introduction, Sally, you talked about some of the low-tech solutions. Some of these are around putting carbon back into the soil. Some of these are around re-establishing hedgerows, so you get ecosystem services and the benefits of those back into those systems. And I term these kind of extensification of farming systems. They will still allow production, but they will allow the repair of the degraded lands that many of our more intensive agriculture systems have produced. But the second driver really aims to feed that extra 2 to 3 billion people. And that's really around the intensification and the intensive production. We're talking about vertical farming. We're talking about very high-tech farming systems that can produce several seasons of foods within a year. And those are relying really on much higher tech technologies. They're relying on robotic systems, the Internet of Things that can be used to sense where the plants are, where the food production systems are. That can also be used to control those systems much more precisely to allow food production to proceed much more efficiently. So I think these are the two basic drivers that we're going to see within food production over the next 10 to 20 years. The first one, extensification, is really around a sustainability brief, and we will see premium products being maintained within that. But the second one is really a driver around food production volumes, but there's also the opportunity to produce and really focus on foods that are not just going to provide calories, but are also going to provide a balanced nutritional profile.
We're definitely going to be delving into all of that in more depth with our panel members here. But if I can bring you in, Professor Bengen, you are, of course, very much concerned with digitization in farming. As you do your research, what's coming up for you as well? And what are some of the surprising things that are coming up through the research that we need to be looking at solutions for?
So everybody's talking about the fourth industrial revolution, and we are also working along those lines, trying to create digital transformation in agriculture. But what we have seen by now has not been revolutionary. At this point of time, we are using different gadgets, robots, IoT, sensor here and there, to boost agriculture in a way, to make it more efficient, but still the revolution is missing. If you look back in the past, you will see that whenever there was a new technology developed by mankind, even from the prehistoric times, that yielded sort of changes in the agricultural practices that then yielded back, the growth of population, etc. Why don't we see revolution nowadays? Basically, we need to rely more on science. There is so much that we still need to do there. First of all, in terms of different sensors, micro and nanoelectronic devices that will measure everything that we need to know about the plants, soil, and environment. At this point of time, we do not know enough. Then robots, drones, IoT, and finally, artificial intelligence, algorithms that will make sense out of all this data and come up with advice on what to plant, which variety at which position, when to fertilize, when to irrigate. So basically to optimize agriculture in a way that we can use less inputs, cheaper inputs, and have more yields, high quality yields, and at the same time reduce risks. And you ask for surprises. Let me give you one. Some of our research results in artificial intelligence, where we worked for Syngenta, the global leader, showed that only by using advice based on data and artificial algorithms we have developed, US production of soybean could be increased for 5% with no additional costs whatsoever. So 5% might seem little, but actually 5% of US production could feed entire Mexico for free.
That's big. That is actually, that is really big. If I can come to you now, Your Excellency, Minister Matos, something that I personally did not know about Uruguay is that it has a very strong place globally in livestock farming, to the point where it holds the world record for the number of cows per inhabitant. With an average of 3.5 animals per person. It produces 10 times more food than its population, exporting 67% of its meat to over 50 markets in the world. So this is something that's very important to you. And I know that, looking at these amazing numbers, we have to also look at the other side. How do we make farming, livestock farming in particular, and also other areas in agriculture, how do we make that more sustainable?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thankful for this invitation, mainly from the Pavilion of Australia here in the Dubai Fair. We are very glad to be here and discuss this topic, and salutation of our mates of panel. Well, Uruguay is a little country with a low population. Maybe we don't have too much cows, but we have too few people in
Possibly.
Maybe the relation is because we have not so big currents of immigration. Now it's increasing this time. But we are a big agricultural producer and exporter. So you have to be in touch with all that's happening abroad about the point of sensibility. And one of these points is the need to have sustainable systems, because today's consumers we have more information, has more sensibility about the points of to take care about the natural resources, the biodiversity. And this point, I think, is very important for us. I am grand-grandson from a producer. I am a producer. And we always take care because we have to take care and look for the next generations. If we don't take care of the soil, if you don't take care of the natural resources, if you don't take care to the water, we cannot see our farm business as only to look to a narrow profit. We have to see with a vision of future. We will not have future if we don't take care of our natural resources. So I think we have a higher and a big demand, intensive demand of food. but we have to use more information, more technology. I think the way is to use more biotechnology that will give us the answer of many questions we are asking today. Surely we will have in next 30 years maybe 2,000 million more inhabitants or 3,000 million more inhabitants. And it's a challenge of all the food producers to achieve these needs, these demands, protecting our environment. That's the point, and I think the way is, and the help we will have to apply by the science and the technology and more information in our production systems.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Professor Wing, if I can come to you, one of the biggest challenges, of course, that we're facing globally is water scarcity, whether you're in Australia or the Middle East, around the world. This is one of the biggest issues. And your work very much centers around solving this particular predicament, because there's only so much water that you can save. And as we keep mining water, it becomes more salty and more brackish, and it depletes in quality as well, doesn't it? The deeper that you go. So talk to us about your research in that area.
Okay, thank you for your question. Yeah, so you asked about our work on Aryza is the name. So that's the genus that contains one of the most important food crops, which is rice. And it turns out that there's about 700,000 different accessions of rice that have been grown and collected from around the world. And these rice varieties, as well as the wild relatives, contain a virtually untapped reservoir of genes that can be used for crop improvement. So one of the wild relatives of rice that we're working on is called Aryza cortata. And this is an ancient species, and it's related to cultivated rice. It can grow in salt water. So our idea is, can we domesticate this species? And if we can domesticate it, then that can be a huge solution to growing rice in marginal environments or in salty environments. And so this is a species that's found in Bangladesh. It's actually harvested already as a sweet rice called uridon. But it has also wild properties. It shatters its seed. It doesn't produce as much rice as you would a regular rice plant. So what we're working on is a process called neo-domestication, where we will take this wild plant and use genome editing to edit some of its genes, 4 or 5 of its genes, to make a bit shorter, a bit more robust, but still have these adaptive properties to be able to grow in salt water. So that's one of the things that we're working on. I mean, you also mentioned, again, water scarcity. There are a number of varieties or accessions of rice that are drought tolerant. So we're also trying to study the drought tolerance to be able to, have the best adaptive traits of a drought tolerant rice plant, but the quality of higher yield and high quality rice. So that's, in a nutshell, what we're doing.
So incredibly important to be following this work, and I know that is going to be a game changer, but because for a lot of the world, rice, it's a staple, it's an essential staple, easy to grow, very cheap. I'm Iraqi Australian, so rice is in my blood, can't live without it. However, despite all of that, health concerns are taking us away from things like carbohydrates and towards protein, that we need to be eating more protein, and how important that actually is. And so that's where I'd like to bring you in, Andrew Cox. I have to call you by your surname as well, because we have 2 Andrews, so it's not confusing. So despite the surge in people looking to increase plant-based proteins in their diet, it's a big trend right now. Actually, animal-based protein is not going anywhere. In fact, the demand is rising. So talk to us about your work at Meat and Livestock Australia and how you're looking to meet that increased demand while also making it more sustainable.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. Hi, everybody. So my background's entirely in marketing and consumer insights rather than science and ag tech. So I guess the perspective I bring to this topic today is from that demand side perspective. And as you said up front, Sally, the population's growing to the point where we will need to feed 10 billion people by 2050. And on top of simple population growth, we've also got economic growth, and we know that as economies grow and people become more wealthy, there's a high demand on the food system, protein demand. People start to want to demand meat more in their diet, and it becomes more of a common part of the diet. So we've got a big challenge in front of us. And of course, we also know that consumers increasingly are much more aware of provenance, and they want to make sure that the food they buy has a smaller ecological footprint as possible, and therefore it's incumbent upon us in the food industry to ensure that we are doing all we can to make sure the produce is ecologically sustainable and also economically sustainable for our farmers. And so I think it's incumbent upon then, especially countries that export a lot of their produce, so Uruguay, good example, New Zealand and Australia, all of these three countries produce a lot more food than we eat domestically, and I think therefore there's an opportunity for these countries to lead the way on productivity and also to lead the way when it comes to sustainability and ecologically. In fact, there's probably an opportunity and almost a responsibility for those countries that are exporting food around the world to do so. And so, yes, meat demand is growing, and we, as you said up front, there's no more land, and so, for example, in Australia, we need to be more productive. So there's as another speaker said, we're at the forefront of a digital revolution, but when you drive around Australia, you don't see robots farming currently and drones and things, but there's a lot of science being developed to help, even with simple technology, really, with the internet can bring like sensors. But it's one sensor on a water trough in the back of an Australian paddock can actually alert the farmer very quickly to a water leakage, which which is extremely common in Australia, water leakage from that infrastructure. So sensors can really help. The amount of data available to a farmer now can really aid productivity, genetics, and of course then the flip side as well is how we do it in an ecologically sustainable manner. And our industry has managed to halve the emissions since 2005 in our business, but we still do contribute over 10% of the carbon that from the Australian industry. So we need to do better. So we obviously we're getting towards carbon neutral by 2030. There's a heap of initiatives that we're working on in that regard. And then I think with the broader topic of how to feed the world sustainably with protein, the countries that have the tech need to find a way to share the tech with those developing nations. For example, 20% of the world's livestock are in Africa, but only 2 or 3% of the meat production is in Africa. So huge challenge there about how the developed world does not get ahead too far of developing nations when it comes to productivity and, of course, sustainability.
Absolutely. And, as we talk about that, this is going to be a very important one in how do we bring in the different stakeholders and then to share that information as well across the world. But Kelvin, if I can bring you in here, as we know, not all proteins are created equal, and nutritional value is incredibly important when we're talking about food. And so talk to us about the ways that we can optimize farming processes to maximize nutrition as well.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Sally. Good to be here. You're exactly right. I think that's one of the questions here. Not all food's equal, not all protein is equal, particularly when we look at dairy protein or animal protein versus some of the vegetable alternatives at the moment. And we're missing the story of the quality of that protein, the availability of the essential amino acids, and or the food group, for example. Whole milk is this wonderful mix of protein, fat, carbohydrate, some vital minerals, and the likes. So as we look to feed that growing population, how we also bring the quality of the protein on at that lower footprint. We were talking backstage before, and some of the similarities between Uruguay and Australia and New Zealand in that dairy and meat protein production is we're using pretty much non-arable land and turning it into low quality feed through an animal to be high protein quality that humans can really benefit from. So I think that part is a little bit lost in the discussion, remembering that. Then, of course, the onus is on us. How do we continue to increase the productivity of that? And some of the speakers have already said that, but do that in a way that meets the sustainability challenges that we've got coming forward. Working with our individual farmers on productivity, using the current best technology, yes. We are definitely going to need technology and science to help us solving the methane and emissions problem for animals on top of that. And as I think was talked about before here on the African side with Andrew was the wider rolling out just the best practice we have today to the wider world will solve a considerable amount of this greenhouse gas emission issue we have as livestock, the industry. Give you an example of that. We belong to an organisation called Global Dairy Platform. 11 out of the 20 top dairy organisations in the world have signed up to a Pathways to Dairy Net Zero, along with some scientific research institutions and the like. The starting point for us is the first 40% of the problem is really how do you roll best practice out? How do you work with governments and other parts of the world to roll out practice, which is different on each country, each farming system, but roll that out, you're sort of 40% of the way there. We kind of believe that current technology that's available, from whether it's getting better productivity through all the sensors and what you may do today, or the emerging technology gets you the next 30%. We've still got to find the rest. But just that starting point of rolling best practice out, continue to drive that productivity technology will get us a long way. But we are going to need that R&D, that technology, the great work that's going on in research institutions to really close that gap for us, for sure.
Matthew, I'd love to bring you in here, and as we talk about, the role of government and industry regulators, what is your perspective on that? What should their role be here?
Yeah, thank you. My perspective of what government should be doing is, I guess, just supporting the collaboration around farming practices and sharing that knowledge around there. I also think that they don't necessarily should be putting like carbon emissions targets there. I think that should be the role of consumers to drive that demand. And you can see companies like Nestle, they're actually going to do that at the moment, signing up to targets in 2050 across scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. And I think if we look at that from consumer packaged goods companies, there's about 90 to 95% of that is actually scope 3. So that's how all our ingredients feed into those as well. So I don't think the government needs to play a role there, but I think they need to play a role in educating our children in terms of making sure that they know what the energy and the health nutritions are of the products, how farm and products are actually produced as well. And as well as recruiting farmers. So 80% of the world's food production is actually made from farmers that are about 60 years of age. So I think we've got an ageing population that we need to have a look at as well.
And so that's a really important point there. How do we deal with that? And I want to bring in as well that this whole idea that you guys have at Bega, which is the circular economy in the Bega Valley as well, and how that plays into, like you said, education, into changing people's attitudes about what we need to do for the future, about, bringing in more young people into farming as well.
Yeah, so Bega's kicked off a pilot program with some industry bodies, KPMG, Rabobank, and it's really around trying to create a truly circular economy for that region. So to bring in key talent to technology, trying to reuse waste, put it back onto the farms, using salty whey out of our cheese production, back into Asparagopsis ponds to feed to the cows to reduce methane. And then in there have a knowledge hub so that we can invite tourism, invite schools through, and they can go through and see the cows and how everything's produced as well.
If I can bring you back, Professor Lowe, on this one, we've had a bit of talk about the importance of animal-based proteins, but of course, as we know, when we talk about proteins, there's been a lot around plant-based proteins. We know that we can grow meat in labs. We can replicate meat in its texture and its taste from plants as well. People are trying to live healthier. So I'd love to know from you, Professor Loh, is plant-based protein, is it really better for the environment? And is it really better for us? Is it something that could ever be as popular as animal protein?
The answer is not necessarily, surprisingly. So, look, as Australians, we probably do eat too much meat. The average is that we consume about 25 kilos of meat per person per year, and the World Health Organization recommends about 24 kilos. So we're probably eating about 4 times too much meat per person. If you compare that with countries like Bangladesh and India, you would be down to 4 kilos of meat, 4 to 8 kilos per person. It's probably a little bit on the low side for those countries. But certainly within Australia and a lot of the developed countries, we could reduce meat consumption. The problem isn't necessarily the meat per se, it's linked more with nutritional problems, particularly with saturated fats, which cause, as we know, heart disease, strokes, obesity, and a range of health problems. So the small amount of the right animal protein is certainly very good for us. It provides macro and micronutrients. And as one of the previous speakers mentioned, the important thing are the essential amino acids. And these are amino acids that we can't make ourselves. Our bodies can't generate these amino acids. We have to eat these amino acids to be able to get healthy development and healthy muscle growth. Things like eggs, dairy, meats provide these essential amino acids in a perfect balance. And actually, if you look at our teeth and our gut, we are designed to be omnivores. We're designed to balance meat together with plant. So when we're talking about plant-based protein, then you can get that mixture of essential amino acids. But you have to take the protein from different plants and different organs of the plant. So protein that's isolated from leaves, from seeds, from fruits, they all contain different essential amino acids. So you can't rely on just one source, you have to mix those up. But the problem with a lot of plant-based protein at the moment is there's a lot of additives that go into those plant-based proteins to make them taste good. There's a lot of salt that goes in, there's a lot of fat. You're adding saturated fat and salt to many of those products so that they taste delicious. And it kind of defeats the object of a nutritious plant-based product. So I think some of those products still have a way to go. But what we are seeing is not just a switch towards vegetarianism and veganism. We're seeing the rise of the flexitarian, and these are people that are deciding not to eat meat for all meals. They're taking a break. They're selecting plant-based options for some meals, and that kind of diet will reduce meat consumption, which will lead to health benefits. But I don't think we're ever going to see meat out of our diets because it provides such an essential range of essential nutrients.
And so, as we talk about the different technologies that will be powering future farms, we are going to be hearing now as well about why developing more traditional in-soil farming is just as important in places like the Caribbean, as we will be hearing from Dr. Salima Campbell-Hauber, the Agricultural Education and Outreach Officer at the One Eleuthera Foundation Centre for Training and Innovation. So OEF is a non-profit organisation whose mission is to empower the island's communities, aiding in transforming them into thriving, self-sufficient ecosystems. Let's hear now from Dr. Hauber.
I am Dr. Salima Campbell-Hauber. When we consider farms of the future and the UN projection that 60% of the world's population will live in urban areas by 2030, pictures of sterile environments controlled by computers with robotic aids may come to mind. The methods we use to produce the food and the environment in which it is produced factor heavily in their nutrient density. While the technologically advanced, controlled environment indoor agricultural systems of today have their place in locations where in-soil production isn't possible because of development or absence of arable land, it is imperative that we not neglect in-soil methods of production in the name of progress alone. In the Bahamas, the majority of producers are smallholders with limited technical knowledge and very limited financial resources at hand to advance their production systems beyond traditional methods of cultivation. The immediate future for smallholder farmers in the Bahamas and much of the developing world will still include in-soil production and lower-tech soilless methods. Here in the Bahamas, winter and spring in our subtropical climate are ideal for the production of horticultural vegetable crops. During the summer, however, vegetable crops fail under extreme sunlight intensity and more frequent torrential rains. To bridge the gap in variety of crops grown created by climatic factors, we at the One Eleuthera Foundation and the Center for Training and Innovation, with the generous aid of the TK Foundation, are exploring a mid-level technology production structure that can revolutionize the Bahamian agricultural industry. The retractable roof cooling house, designed by Cravo Equipment Limited, will provide control of the environment when conditions are unfavorable for optimal crop production, making the year-round production of a wide variety of vegetables possible. The most revolutionary impact on Bahamian agriculture will be realized during the summer months when, although ambient temperatures are not extreme, sunlight intensity is so great that plant temperatures can reach detrimental zones. By shading the crop during the hottest period of the day, vegetable crops are not stressed to the point of diminished yields and increased susceptibility to the higher pest and disease pressure. This project will achieve our mission of training and skill development in agriculture to drive local innovation and create economic opportunities that contribute to the sustainable development of Eleuthera and the Bahamas at large. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Hauber there for that. She brings up some really important points that I'd love to put to our panel. Minister Matos, if I can come to you. You know, she talks about the importance of not leaving behind farmers who are smaller producers in rural areas. How do we do that? How do we make sure that we are supporting those farmers? And I know that this is something that is of concern to you as well in Uruguay, and you know, this is something that you're working towards, particularly as well for women farmers who are in rural areas.
That's a good point from the paper of the government to support the little area farmers or producers. We have a point of narrow farm, narrow areas, little areas, and lower application of technology, lower profit, and that's the circle we have to break. No? You have to support with technical assistance, with services of several organizations, with participation of the government in order to support and to bring technology from those producers. And this time we have also the big challenge of the climate change. We are not in the same situation related with 10 or 20 years ago. We have more extreme problems with the weather. We have intensive rainfalls. Few times later, we have droughts, and we have strong winds, and it's different. The climate is a big challenge for the natural open production. It's very difficult, and we need to have a strategy to have answers to these all challenges of the climate also. The technology, the knowledge to face those challenges is easier from the big farmers and the people who has access to information. And the paper of the government is to support those small producers to have the same chances to achieve those technologies. Even with financial programs also, to have and associated programs also to increase the size of the producer with the association between them, among them.
This is vital here. Kelvin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as, you know, Fonterra being a cooperative, and how do we support farmers? And, you know, farming is difficult at the best of times. And so your thoughts, I'd love to hear your thoughts as to what the Minister just said there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Now, farming's hard. I think, as we were talking about there before, maybe that's a little bit why there's an ageing population. Maybe I'll perhaps pick up, not necessarily on the Fonterra farmers, but some of the work that I think needs to be done from an industry good perspective to support perhaps some of the government initiatives. So I mentioned Global Dairy Platform, which Fonterra belongs to, one of the founding members, along with 3 other major co-ops in the world. We have contributed to Global Dairy Platform, and with its membership, there's a program called Dairy Nourish Africa going. Started off in Tanzania, supported some pro bono work by Bain and a non-profit venture fund from Land O'Lakes, a US dairy company, working to how we can bring best practice that is suitable for the Tanzanian environment in this example. Because as I was saying before, every farming system is different location, but the benefits, of course, is not just about getting better yields and productivity, it's the livelihoods of the people that are farming and the communities, but you need to look at the whole value chain from the farm right through to actually the consumer on the shelf. So working there to develop that model and then looking to roll that out to Kenya and other markets. And it contributes to producing high quality nutrition at a lower footprint. The biggest challenge we face in a lot of the is sponsorship, because, you know, as a cooperative we also have limited funds. We're trying to roll out best practice. Yes, you can tap into the wider governments and support, but how do we I suppose that the pressing need and the value is not necessarily as seen. Yeah, the big farmers, the big groups, yes, the technologies the Minister said are available, but it's the smaller farm holders who are the majority of the world, who are the 600 million out of the 1 billion, whose livelihoods depend on that, and they can make a real difference to poverty, make a real difference to to nutrition for the future, and do that in a more sustainable way. That's, I think, one of the key challenge unlocks here that we miss a little when we just think from a, let's call it, more developed market view of the world.
Absolutely. I can see you nodding there, Andrew. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's really good to hear from Kelvin what's happening in dairy. I mean, on the marketing side, I belong in the competitive world. You know, I'm trying to drive market share for Australian beef and lamb around the world, but these sort of pre-competitive initiatives I think are absolutely vital, working together on sustainability, working on nutrition. Obviously I have to disagree with my learned professor friend over there, contractually obliged to say that Australians eat just enough red meat. But I think the point is the Western world actually eats too much of everything, right? So whether you can choose your category, whether it's sugar, alcohol, carbohydrates, meat, we could probably all afford to cut down, me included. But I think the trick really will be not necessarily who cuts down, but how do we feed those areas where the population growth is, right? And a lot of that will need to happen domestically, right? So, you know, Africa's not about to start importing Australia's beef and dairy production. Africa will need to develop a way to feed itself vastly, like all continents do. Every country's got its own supply challenges, and food security is obviously a big topic. So It's great to hear what's happening in dairy. I'm not sure there's the same initiative happening in the livestock sector and for animal protein, and I think it does need to, and I'm not sure who takes the lead there. It's a very big challenge to roll out best practice around the world. I think corporations can play a role, governments certainly can play a role, and the research community, academics and universities, etc., can certainly play a role. And I really do think, I don't have the answer about how that happens, but I think it is one big part of the answer about how we do feed the world going forward.
Someone who might have the answer is Professor Bengian. Definitely, how do we bring in all of these stakeholders within the value chain and beyond?
You're really putting me on the spot here to find a solution to such a complex, but let me give it a try. So I will first like to reflect on the movie we've seen where the colleague was talking about in-soil production. So if experience has taught us anything, it's not to put all the eggs in one basket. So people tend to talk about vertical farming, hydroponics, urban farming. Those are all parts of the solution, but not one individual technology will provide the entire solution. And same goes for big and small farms. In southeast of Europe, where I come from, we have majority of farmers are actually small ones with 2 hectares or less. Even worse situation in those terms you can find in India, for example, where millions of farmers are small farmers, basically. And when we're developing new technologies, digital technologies to support farmers, we need to be developing, to kind of think on 2 tracks, developing solutions for big companies, big farms, but also for the small ones. And these solutions are not always the same. So for the smaller farmers, we look for low-cost, easy-to-use solutions, sort of even virtual cooperatives, etc. We are developing some devices that can be used throughout the world without any technological experience or knowledge. And then we can boil it down to the responsibility of researchers, but also of governments. In a recent study I did for United Nations FAO for Southeast Europe, we asked farmers, small farmers, what do they expect from the government? And my first guess would be money, right? They always need subsidies and support, and but actually the answer was knowledge. They understood that they needed to deploy new technologies. They understood the value of those technologies. They were ready to pay for them. They just didn't know how to choose and what to choose. And they relied on researchers, on the academia, and on the government to provide this knowledge to them.
Bringing in research and academia, Professor Wing, let's talk a bit about that, and the importance of that and sharing that knowledge, because this is something that you do within your work as well, sharing that knowledge around the world. Let's use what you're learning as well. I'd love your input, but something we were talking about backstage is thinking about the different plant varieties of rice in Australia and what you're exploring there, and also working with Indigenous groups as well within Australia. Talk to us about that. This is pretty incredible.
Okay, thank you. This is a great discussion. Yeah, so I was talking about the wild relatives of rice. It turns out that there are 2 wild relatives of rice that are endemic to Australia. It's Oryza meridionalis, which is very closely related to cultivated rice, and then there's also a species called Oryza australiensis, and these are found in, a lot of these varieties are found in native lands, and but they contain a virtually untapped resource, genetic resource of valuable traits that are essentially adapted to the Australian environment. So if we could study these in more detail, I think that there could be opportunities to develop native food products that would be, that would come from the Aboriginal tribes, and it's an exciting possibility. And so we've done a lot of. I'm a genome scientist, a genome biologist, so we've actually already sequenced these genomes. But it's just understanding the population genetics of these varieties and where they are, and how to tap into that information. But I just wanted to make a comment about the training piece. I've had a lot of experience. There are at least in the plant world, they have the CGIAR centers. One would be IRRI, the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines, CIMMYT in Mexico. These centers were involved in the initial green revolution, and they're still in existence. And they're involved in developing genetic materials in their regions for like rice, wheat, and maize, for example. And also they do training at many levels. And so like a simple solution is laser leveling a field. If you can laser level a field, then that can increase the productivity 10 to 20% of a particular crop plant. Just doing that, and people having technologies for that. They don't have that. Some of the poor farmers, small farmers, and things. But those centers do train small farm holders how to do these types of things, and so that's and having a really good agricultural extension system in countries to teach best practices. That's also very important. I mean, there's also I was just at a meeting in Doha called the Islamic Organization for Food Security, and you have wheat varieties that can produce 10 tons per hectare. That's called the yield potential. But you grow these in Africa, you get 1 ton per hectare. And it could actually produce those 10 tons, but it's the technologies and it's the learning how to grow these crops properly it's a huge gap. And I think really Africa is the next frontier for all of us. I think we need to invest big in that region and work together as a community to help produce more food in these countries.
Absolutely. And something else that it caught my eye as well, particularly that Dr. Halber was talking about, is the climate in the Bahamas as well, which is actually very similar to the climate here in the GCC, in the UAE, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where you're based as well. So talk to us about the technologies that are being used to, we've already started, but the technologies that are being developed to be able to farm better and more productively in these challenging hot climates.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Bahama story was very interesting. And again, what we say what I like to say in Saudi, it's hotter than hell and there's no water. So how do you sustainably grow crops in an environment like that? So we're really pushing the concept of more controlled environmental agriculture, where the Saudis would grow their high value crops and the fruits and vegetables, and then spend more time importing the staples. Because that's cheap to grow and easy to import. But I mean, so no offense to South America, but I mean, when I go to the grocery store at Kaust, where I work, we get blueberries from Ecuador. I mean, that to me, that's not sustainable. And I really think locally produced, focusing on more locally produced, high value crops, I think is a real key, and it's something that we need to strive for. So.
Absolutely. And, there are different trends as well that are happening in farming, particularly when we think about urban farming, when we think about bringing farms to the people. And here in the UAE we have things like the Sustainable City, where people are growing their own food where they live as well. If I can bring you back on this, Professor Bengen, how important are initiatives like this and providing technologies like this to people to be able to grow their own food, to be able to be part of that process? How can that transform farming?
So every little helps. That's true. So in that sense, it makes sense to grow locally, to grow on urban farms, etc. But I think it's far more important to deliver technologies to the farmers. What we see in the majority of developed world is that young people are leaving. Actually, they already left villages. Majority of population lives in urban areas. And in order to bring them back, or to motivate the ones that are there to stay, young people, and to work in farming, we also see the answer in digital technologies. So agriculture, the way it was done, as you said, it's hard. It's really hard, and it's really risky. out of 5 risks associated with agricultural production, 4 are basically related to the weather. So it's almost like a crystal ball thing or gambling.
Yeah.
So by using technologies, we hope to support farmers to do their businesses in an easier way, which is not so physically demanding, which is more, let's say, that addresses their needs and their ideas better in a modern society, that also reduces the risks, and that allows them to be, basically to have sufficient funds to support their families. 70 years ago, it was okay to be a farmer with 2 hectares and to grow onions, and you could support your family with that. Today, that is not possible. So you either have to have lots of land or you have to do high-value crops. All in all, it comes to the knowledge and to the technologies that will make farming easier. So I think that is where we need to focus.
Matthew, would you agree with that in terms of this is where the focus needs to be? Do we need more education around these areas as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what Professor said there around bringing in technology to, I guess, make the job a lot easier will help the younger generation take over from the older generation as well. You know, I think that they just don't like working hard like they did back in the day, and you know, want to live in the city and not necessarily in those urban areas as well.
And you know, that's really interesting. You know, how do we then make sure that farming continues as well, because it's a generational thing. You know, as Minister Matos, you said, you know, you are a producer because this is within your family blood as well. And so, you know, how do we make sure that younger people are part of this industry as well? I'd love to hear from you around that. And I can see Professor Wing wanting to comment too. Yeah.
That's a challenge also. The majority of the population of the world comes from the rural areas. Because 10 years ago, we have the change. We have more people living in the cities than living in the countryside. But it's real we have an origin of the rural areas. But we also have the big misunderstanding because of the risk of the system of production in free-range systems. No? And we have a challenging system of production. So we need the comprehension also from people from the city. We are not the murderers of the environment. We are really the solution, is not the problem. So I think the topic of conscience, to know the knowledge of our reality is very important. And it's also a challenge of communication of farmers and agricultural producers. We have to have a good communication, what we can do and what we can improve. And I agree with her. That is one point favor to have the urban farming, but it's not the final solution. To feed the world, you need the agriculture, you need the farmers, you need the technology, you need the cooperation.
Yes, Professor Wing, in terms of should we be having more farming programs for children at school? I know that this is something that has come up in previous Majlis discussions as well, particularly around climate change. Should there be a stronger connection to nature too?
Yeah, I think all high school grads should have a driver's license for driving a tractor. So, but that's. I have a few jokes here, but yeah, that's a great question, and we discussed this in the panel. So, I come from California, and there was a program at Berkeley by a chef called, her name is Alice Waters, and she started a program called the Edible Schoolyard, and this is a program where kids learn about sustainable agriculture. They grow quite a bit of their own food at the school, and they also gather food from local producers. And the goal of this Edible Schoolyard program is really a free, sustainable lunch for all K through 12 students in the state of California, which is about the same population as Saudi Arabia. And so we So we recently received funding from KAUST to start a program like this at KAUST, and that's very easy to do this because it's a wealthy university and a lot of input. There's a huge Western influence, but the goal that I'm really pushing now is to get this, to roll this out into the into Saudi Arabia. And our next door neighbors are in Thuwal, and we're working with the Ministry of Education, Economic Planning to make this happen. Obesity is very high, diabetes, poverty is a problem in Saudi, and we think that teaching kids about the importance of eating locally will really improve their diets substantially, and at the same time you can learn anything from language and culture to computer science and chemistry and genetics through studying plants. Most biology programs in elementary school and or in the K through 12 school system, it's all about frogs, humans, worms, things like that. But it's not. But you can. Plants do the same thing. They all have DNA, and they're very exciting. And one reason why I got into plant biology, I wanted to be a physician. I didn't have the grades to get in, but you can water plants at night, and they're still going to be there in the morning. So can't do that with a human patient. So anyway, so that's why I'm here right now.
And that connects to the discussion as well around affordability versus sustainability. And if I can come to you, Professor Lowe, on this one and ask you, you know, when we go to the supermarket, we want to eat better, we want to eat better quality produce, and I will ask our industry partners here as well on the panel on this one. But when the cost is high, you know, how much of that is really about sustainability and how much of that is really about, you know, other factors as well? You know, how do we get that balance? How do we strike that balance between making sure that we eat more sustainably, which inevitably does cost more, and making sure that these good and nutritional foods and produce are available to more people as well?
Yeah, look, I think that's the critical question. I think when you look at consumer preference for different foods, cost comes out number one. So making your weekly budget, making that meet, making sure you can feed the family, it's the most important consideration for most consumers around buying food. And so, you know, you might have some wealthy individuals, some wealthy families that have the luxury of expressing choice through food, but that's not the majority of consumers. So cost would be first, then second consideration would actually be health. So many people understand the relationship between poor food, poor nutrition, poor diet, and poor health. And so if there is a preference that's made, it's really to try and eat more healthily, eat more fruit and vegetables, you know, the 5+2 that we hear about. Maybe reducing meat consumption, did I say that? But that might not be the complete answer. And World Health Organization recommends it. Anyway, I won't do that. The third area then that comes, you know, a sorry last is really to be able to eat sustainably. So to select produce that's really going to not have such a large impact on the environment. And so that's really the hierarchy of choice for consumers. So consumers want healthy, sustainable food, but they want it at the same price as the normal food. So that's really the challenge. I think the presentation that was given from our colleague in the Bahamas was really interesting. And you know, in soil production and the nutrients and micronutrients that are produced there, if you grow plants too quickly, they basically don't have the density of nutrients within them. So you've kind of got this problem. If you grow plants on a very large scale, grow them quickly, grow them under these kind of elevated, accelerated growth conditions, then they don't have the nutritional density within them. So you can eat the matter, but you're not getting the calories and the nutrients together with that. So I think that's one of the critical issues to solve. It needs a combination of different foods to solve that. I would like to just cover off on one topic though, which is raised by Professor Wing, which is really around probably these underutilized crops. And if we look at our calorie consumption, most of our calories globally are met by the big three plants, so maize, rice, and wheat. You could probably refer to those as empty calories. The nutritional benefit with those, we realize our nutrition, not our calories, from the diversity of plants and animal products that we consume. Yet in Australia, out of the top 250 global crop species, none of those come from Australia, and we have a massively underutilized, underexplored crop basis within Australia. We've seen it in Africa as well. There's projects called the Orphan Crop Program within Africa, which is highlighting the top 100 underutilized crops there. So, and this also relates back to local food production and cutting back into cultures and diets that have used these foods for generations. So I think that's also part of the piece, is this combination between high value, high production crops that are going to give you the calories, combinations with meat and complex plants that are going to give you the nutritions, but it has to be done at similar prices.
Yeah, can we strike that balance with new technologies? Kelvin, can I ask you that question?
There's a lot in that. There's a lot in Professor's comments just there, that value action gap and the like.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges we have here is the real true cost of food. It hasn't necessarily been passed on to consumers in recent time, particularly when we start to factor in all these externalities and the likes as we now face into the challenge of sustainable food production, which some of the big food producers or marketers of the world, which we were talking about before over here, are actually leading the charge on. Those costs will come back to consumers. So we are going to have to find ways to continue to improve the productivity and reduce the cost of still meeting those environmental targets for sure. And I think what we're kind of hearing here is the answer is it's not one size fits all. And it's not one food group, and it's not all grown locally. But how can we get the balance of what is grown locally, which fits the environment and meets it, and then what is supplemented from areas that actually are better placed to produce that food group? And another plug for dairy. Thanks for reminding me, that beautiful high density for low calorific content. But it is that combination. So the local, the imported foods, and that probably brings us back to that challenge of government supporting those open borders, supporting the transfer of knowledge, because not one country can feed the world, not one country can feed perhaps, well, some could, but the quality of the food groups, local plus imported, how do we find that combination of solutions and get that affordability right? Some big, maybe I open more questions up than answers for there, but
I think that's important. Yeah, I can see you itching to add in there. Andrew Cox, go for it.
Well, I think it's a really important point. The last couple of questions have probably connected it. Consumers for generations have become accustomed to spending less of their disposable income on food, and that should change, and I think it's changing right now. So there's a big job for the communicators of the world to demonstrate why this product is worth paying more for than you did yesterday. And exactly the same time as that's been happening, nearly every country in the world has experienced a great drift towards the cities. I lived in Japan for a number of years. The culture really is built on rice, but I never met really anybody who'd had the first idea about rice production. Australia is the same. Both my parents come from farms, and here I am in Singapore, living in Singapore. So there's a big job to be played, and from the government perspective, of course, that means that voters tend to live in cities, right? And so voters broadly unaware of food production, and they're dictating government decision making. So there's a big job to be played here in demonstrating why this product's worth paying more for, demonstrating or educating people about our supply chain, sustainability, production, where food comes from, not from the supermarket, but from a farm. So that's a really global initiative as well, and I think that's absolutely key moving forward, that farmers are able to tell their story using media technology, etc., to guarantee that their livelihoods moving forward,
To understand why you're paying more for this incredible quality food is really vital. We all need to be closer to that process and to really see it and understand it. I'd love to open up for questions and comments from our audience. If anybody has questions and comments for our panel here. Yes? Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is William Ward. I represent a Australian technology, Green Eco Technologies. We repurpose food waste on site. We happen to have our system here at the pavilion repurposing the hospitality waste that goes through. I split between the UK and here in the UAE, and what I'm hearing this afternoon is how you're talking about getting better yields per hectare, technologies and one thing and another. What we see a lot of is how many food production companies destroy good food, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, because the supermarkets say they don't meet the criteria, they don't look pretty. It's like a beauty parade. So where is the problem? We have one potential customer that's destroying 8 tons per day of tomatoes and cucumbers. So please tell me, why are we trying to produce more when we're actually destroying waste that could be quite easily eaten and used in many, many different ways?
Great comment and great question, and I know people want to jump in there. Yes, Professor Andrew Lowe, coming to you, because you actually say we don't need to grow more, we're mismanaging what is already being grown. So talk to us a bit more about that.
Yeah, look, I'd agree with the person that posed the question there. We are already producing enough food to feed the planet and probably another 2 billion people as well. If we consider that on average 30% of the food we produce is wasted in some form, the answer is in then the distribution of food. Now, actually in Australia, it's worse than 30%. 40% of the food produced in Australia is actually wasted. And when you look along the supply chain, that waste occurs at different points along the supply chain. It tends to occur, in the production in the fields at farmers, producers. It tends to occur in those primary processing plants, right through to the supermarket, but then also at home. On average, the Australian Australian household wastes $4,000 of food a year. I told that statistic to my wife, and she said that certainly doesn't happen in our household. So look, and I think it would be on average, and also with the restaurants as well. So I think at every point along the supply chain, you mentioned the supermarkets. You've got Woolies that are doing the odd bunch, so they are trying to encourage customers to consume misshapen fruits and vegetables. They have a line specifically for those. So I think some of the supermarkets are starting to relax, but it needs a consistent approach right at every point in the supply chain. And also when you look in developing countries, most food waste is actually at the production site. And it's the lack of ability to move food effectively from the farm into the markets. In developed countries, the food is further down. The food waste is further down the supply chain. Tends to be at the supermarkets and at homes and in restaurants. So that education piece, the engagement piece, how do we reduce food waste, is absolutely essential with it. But it also can potentially generate new industries as well. So food waste, rather than just rotting in the field, could actually be processed. I mean, wasted, or tomatoes that would otherwise be wasted, can be purified for lycopenes. They can go into nutraceuticals. Cosmetics can be produced from some of these food wastes. And actually in Australia, we've actually got the Cooperative Research Centre for Fight Food Waste. which is $120 million investments into new programs to actually reduce food waste, new programs to transform food waste into usable products. But the education piece and the engagement piece is absolutely critical to reducing this.
Thank you so much for that question. I know, Matthew, you've got more to add on that as well about how do we reduce food waste, particularly earlier on in the supply chain.
Yeah, and also I guess extended retailer responsibility as well. So pushing this out to the retailers. An example of this is you can buy one avocado for $1 or you can buy 4 for $3. So we're pushing on to the consumer to try to overbuy and then end up having waste at the end of the stream as well. So I think there's something, a role the government can play there in terms of legislating, put regulations on and responsibility back to retailers and producers there.
So important as well. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think
Minister.
at this point we have a cultural topic. We have a problem because if you have a fruit in the counter of the supermarket with a little spot, we will not, the majority of people will not select this fruit. They will separate, no? And maybe we will transform in a waste of food. In the same way, the next time, the agriculture will go to use more agrochemicals to avoid this spot. There was no problem with this fruit, but we have a cultural problem.
Yeah.
No? So I think we have to make more information, more education. We have to work with the educational system to show the people what's healthy and what's not healthy. Because looking for the perfect fruit, we are contaminating much more.
Exactly.
And I think this is very important. It's very simple. But
it's not a beauty contest
no,
for fruit.
That's it.
But this is a really important topic to the point where actually we're going to be talking about it at the next World Majlis on Sunday, the 20th.
Beauty is not bad. Beauty is not bad. But
Sunday, the 20th of February. So this coming Sunday, it's the next World Majlis is all about that. We have the most incredible panel around it. I'm going to very quickly take another question. One more question. Yep. 2 more questions. Here we go.
Thank you. I was just wondering if it's probably a question to the researchers, but possibly to industry, to give some examples of specific innovations in the biological sciences or agricultural sciences that are addressing climate change specifically or carbon emissions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, Professor Begnin.
Thank you very much for that question. Actually, what many people are not aware of, that the agricultural knowledge that we have today, of what to plant, when to irrigate, when to fertilize, is a result of hundreds of years of experience of our grandfathers, the people who grown crops at certain locations, so they acquired this knowledge. Now, due to the climate change, very often this knowledge is no longer valid. So what we know, we cannot apply, or actually we do apply it, but the results are not optimal. One alternative would be, to wait for next 200 years and get a new experience and learn what to do. That's obviously not an option. So the best thing we can offer today is basically to use digital technologies, to use sensors and artificial intelligence to quickly come up with the new recipes on what should be done and where and how.
One more question over here. Hi.
Hi, the question is for His Excellency Fernando Costa as well as Andrew Cox. It's about the price that we pay for consuming meat, red meat specifically. Right, so my name is Wadi, and I feel that when I purchase meat, I don't really pay the real value or the cost that it took to produce that meat. So I'm wondering if you feel that it is possible for us to change the pricing structure globally so that people do end up paying the real cost of producing that meat. And I know cost of food is rising and life is difficult as it is, but is that a viable solution to reducing the amount of meat that we consume without ruining the industry? Because I am for the meat industry. I just wanted to have a smaller footprint and I want people to eat less. I'm a flexitarian and I'm proud of it. And I see in this culture people just addicted to meat to a level that I've never seen before. It's just becoming more and more available, more and more trendy, and more tasty, and more cheap. So is that feasible to really sell people the price of meat with its true cost without subsidies? And if so, would it help or would it backfire? Thank you.
Over to you, Minister.
Yes, we'll start with Minister Matos. I think
It's easy.
we
It's
addressed
easy
it a little bit, but
Great.
please go ahead, yes.
So the maids of the panel can help me, maybe. I don't think so. We have a method to make so great product as beef cheap, because there is a tendency of the consumer to ask for a product with healthy, tasty, with inequity, sustainable, and all those things in one product. To have a system of production with lower costs is very difficult. And we are in the market that the demand is higher than the offer. And the normal tendency is that we will not achieve all the demand that is increasing nowadays. We really have a challenge where everybody asks about the possibility to if is or not a competition, those other products that intend to be imitation of meat. They name meat-based implant. For me, it's not meat. This one, it's another product. But everybody has the chance to choose if you want a tasty or if you want vegetable-based product that is an imitation of meat. It's not really proved if the footprint of those products, that is their advertisement, is propaganda, is better than the natural production of meat. Free-range production is, I think, we have natural emissions, but we have capture of carbon also. So to have this product healthy, with inequity, with quality, with tasty, cheap, I don't think so we have a chance. But maybe the main explanation is that the demand is increasing in the Middle East, in the Southeast Asia increasing a lot. It's a very big challenge to us to attend the demand in those areas of the world.
I think that's yeah.
Sorry?
Just because we're running out of time, that's a great answer. And I think, you know, if we're looking at quality, particularly if you're looking at quality, then, you know, you really have to factor that in, don't you? I'm just going to give you a very quick last word, Andrew. Yeah.
So Australian lamb is already climate neutral, and Australian beef's on that journey. So the price of the product is priced accordingly, like every other product in the world, economically speaking, for the supply chain to have some profitability. It's not one of the most profitable goods that you will buy for the farmer, but that's how we price the product. If you're referring more to environmental taxes, etc., it's a very extremely difficult area to capture, especially because the carbon that our industry emits is part of the natural carbon cycle versus fossil fuels, etc. So the accounting is very difficult. Obviously, from an industry point of view, no, we do not want a carbon tax or an environmental tax on meat. We're really focused on reducing our carbon footprint, and in fact, we believe, for example, Australian livestock, we have 355 million hectares with grazing land with livestock on it, and we think we're part of the solution for carbon. We think that with technology, we'll be able to take carbon from the atmosphere and put it back into the soil and actually be carbon positive, which means you will be able to return to your fully meatitarian habits and with confidence that you're contributing to the environment. So I look forward to that day. 2030 is our goal, and we're working really hard to achieve that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrew Cox. Thank you to all of our panel. What an incredible panel. Please join me in thanking all of our speakers today for their phenomenal input. so fantastic, and I want to thank you, Your Excellencies who are in the audience as well, all of our distinguished guests, our audience too, and of course there will be another World Majlis on Sunday all about food waste, which as I know is a huge topic as well. But of course, thank you to our co-curators, the Australian Pavilion, for this fantastic World Majlis. And you can find out more about the upcoming World Majlis events on virtualexpo2020.com. And so for our virtual participants, do join us for the next session, which is all about the value of food. Thank you all so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.